Welcome back to the Kris Krohn Show. On one of my recent YouTube videos, we were talking about house hacking, and I introduced a potential candidate to have as my apprentice, Carson, the CEO of my company. And Carson, we shot a couple of episodes together, and I've been evaluating you, and it's been a little bit more of an audition, really wondering if I spend a year with you to help you grow your portfolio, are you really going to make a great student?
Yeah, to be honest, Kris, I'm still a little shooken up because I did not know it was an audition. And you pulled that fast one kind of on me at the end of that last episode.
Well, to be honest, I was watching you go through your portfolio review. I was looking at your first several properties, and I'm like, okay, I was there for those. I was there to mentor you and make sure they were done the right way. But the episode ended really shockingly, where you're standing at this footprint of this $1.3 million house, and I'm thinking, okay, what's happening here? And then I found out that you dumped over $300,000 into the land to buy it cash, and I'm like, you took all of your winnings from your first 4 properties and rolled it into a primary residence? Honestly, very shocking.
Yeah. I still think that I can defend a lot of those decisions. And I think we have time here today for me to do some of that. Do you want to dive into that?
We'll take a look at it. Let's actually just start with how it started so nice in the beginning.
Yes.
Right? I mean, most people don't know your background. I hired you right out of college from film school. I needed someone to edit my videos. This is even really before I was on social media.
Yep.
Because we had videos for other local purposes. And you struck me as a very fascinating individual because most people just stay in their lane. And your lane should have been film. But it took me a couple years before I started picking up on the fact that you were consuming the content and learning at the same time and taking notes. And you were actually starting to implement building your own portfolio. You were saving money the way I taught. You started buying real estate the way I taught. And that was kind of shocking and surprising.
Well, actually, the opportunity to come work for you really was a huge pivot in my life. I had just sort of failed out of my career in Hollywood and moved back to Utah and started coming to work with you. And I started to realize that if I wasn't going to be some big name in Hollywood, it's how then can I be financially successful at all? So then I get paired with this guy, and I got to be honest, Kris, real estate has never had this huge draw for me. But after listening to you speak at events, we used to do a weekly symposium up at your house where you'd invite people to come in and you'd explain why single family real estate.
Yeah.
And I just clued in that I was like, this is really powerful stuff. And while I don't want to be the one necessarily, touching the granite marble and doing fix and flips, I never really wanted to be that guy, but I wanted the power of real estate. And so I said, I had a life reset. I'm just going to learn everything I can. I'm just going to, Kris, have you seen the movie Sabrina?
Yeah.
So the limo driver for this billionaire, the window was always down in the limo. And he would just listen to what the owner of this company was doing, whether he was buying stock or selling, and then he'd go do the exact same thing for himself at home. That's kind of what I did. I'd listen to you teach, and then I'm just going to go start trying to implement these things on my own that Kris is teaching.
Well, let's talk about your first property.
Yep.
So you took us to your very first property. Give us the numbers on it again.
Yeah. Pull up those numbers here really quick. That was a really cool deal. We were looking for a home. We didn't have this huge down payment that we could do, but I was surrounded by you. You put me in touch with Tyler, our acquisitions director, and we made some really cool things happen. And I ended up getting that house for $280,000 was the purchase price.
Now, this is a house that had a basement apartment.
Yep.
And that's the one that you rented for how much?
About $800 when we started. It was probably up to almost $1,000 by the time we sold that property.
Yeah, which was over a couple of years.
Yep.
But your mortgage on it was what, $1,300, $1,400?
Yeah, $1,376.
So you and your wife basically said, we're going to take on this big mortgage, but we're only going to have to pay $500 a month of it because we've subsidized by having someone else live in it.
Yes.
And that's not an easy choice for a lot of people to make because it's now shared wall and you feel like there's reduced privacy.
Oh, yeah.
But why were you willing to make that sacrifice?
Because I watched you do it. I was kicking myself when I was doing it because your first house, the basement apartment, covered the whole mortgage. And I'm like, that is a dream. And I did as best as I could with the deal that I had, that I was able to find in the current market.
Well, actually, my house was a lot like yours, but within the first year, I was able to refinance it and basically put it on an interest-only payment.
Yep.
And that's what allowed it to actually,
Oh, that's a smart hack.
cover itself. So
I like, we made the sacrifice, Kris, because I saw the benefit. And then kind of like Kalen, where those first few months where you're like, we've got extra cash. Where did this come from? It was like, oh my gosh, we made the right thing. But it didn't come without sacrifice. Like, you know as well as I do, like, it's not always easy having a tenant living below you.
it was a smart move. Now, did you sell it to move into your next house?
No,
You kept it?
So again, because we were saving so much money every month on rent, we were able to save up and get our next property without losing the asset. Most people sell and use that equity to get their next primary residence.
When you rented it out, the upstairs and the downstairs,
Yes, it
how
was
much were
golden.
you collecting a month?
Oh, we were renting upstairs for like, I think $1,400 a month, and then downstairs for $800. We were cash flowing like $700-800 a month.
Yeah, which is,
when
by the
it
way,
was-
really strong.
It was
That's a very, very strong
cash
cash flow.
cow.
Yeah.
I love that house.
So you have that house.
Yep.
It's still growing. It's growing in equity, and you and your wife move into your next house,
Yep.
which also has a basement apartment.
Yep.
This was a more expensive house, though.
Slightly, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you paid how much for it?
Uh,
420.
$440.
Paid $440,000 for it, and you had the basement that rented for how much?
$1,300.
But the total mortgage was.
$1,969.
So you basically went from having a smaller house and paying $500 a month to a much nicer house, but only paying $600 a month.
And between all three doors, we were still cash flowing.
Yeah.
At the
You were
time.
living for free.
Living for free in PG.
Yep.
House in Orem that was essentially a duplex.
Yeah.
And it was golden, Kris.
Yeah.
Like,
That was very much the situation when I bought my second house. I rented out the basement. It didn't cover the full mortgage, but the cash flow from my first one did. So we were still living for free.
Yeah.
And now I had two homes that were going up in value. They were appreciating. I was getting tax benefits on both.
well, and the real kick in the pants, that this was a big lesson for me at the time, Kris, is it was like December 23rd, and I got the email from Orem Police Department telling me that I was in violation of code, blah, 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 1203, and that I actually was not allowed to rent the upstairs and the downstairs of that house in Orem.
Did that force you to sell it?
Yeah, so someone, in hindsight, someone must have reported us.
Do you know what's crazy, though? You could have come to me and I could have given you the simplest hack.
Yeah,
Instead of selling it, did you know that you could have done a lease option, which basically says that they technically contractually have ownership and then can sublet themselves?
yeah.
It's almost the same situation, but
So
you
Tyler
wouldn't
and
have had to
Tyler and I discussed that, and we went over those options, and we were like, there's some pros and cons to it and some risks you take on, and ultimately Tyler was like, this house has appreciated so much,
take the winnings.
it might not be a bad time to sell right now anyway.
Yeah.
So we decided to take the winnings.
Yeah, this. When I evaluate that decision, I'm like, there's a lot of people that will say, well, I want to own this home for 30 years and eventually be paid off. And I never want to be in that situation. Because how much equity did you harvest out of it?
Because we didn't pay capital gains, I walked away with $180,000.
$180,000. $180,000 is enough to buy a couple more homes. So anytime I can either hang on to a home and refinance it and buy another one, or if I can sell it and buy at least two more, my portfolio as a net actually doubled. It increased. And that's the important
That's kind of
thing.
what Tyler said. He's like, yes, the cash flow from this is great, and you see it as like this amazing thing because it's like additional income now. But he's like, long term, having more cash in the game growing
Yeah.
is sometimes more important than the cash today that you're getting.
But I don't think Tyler's even taken that advice himself. He's been working
pays
towards
off
having
some.
a mostly
He's
paid
paid
off
off some,
portfolio,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But then you did take those earnings and you bought two houses in Florida.
Yes.
And we did go over those numbers. And you bought those homes 3.5 years ago. They've each gone up about $60,000 in value. You bought them for the low 200s. And so you've gained $120,000 on what you've put in. So you've had really good, appreciation. And you're sitting between a $400 and $500 positive cash flow on each one of them.
Yep.
So if you take a look at your portfolio as a whole, you've made some really smart moves.
Yep.
Where things kind of take a little bit of a wrong turn, and by a little I mean a lot, is I was shocked to find out that you had already broken ground on a $1.3 million property, and you put the $300,000 and rolled it into the land cash, and then leveraging that for the construction costs. And I'm like, that $300,000+ was enough to buy you probably
For sure.
4 more doors.
Yep.
And then you would have gone from, your portfolio would have kept multiplying. And so where I'm really stuck right now, like where I'm concerned is I'm like, that money that you harvested, I would have put that towards more investment properties. You put it into a primary residence, and you say you have some justification on that.
Yeah, so what happened was this house, like you see in the video, it's 2 houses down from where we currently live. A piece of land came available for sale. We want to stay in the neighborhood where we're at. So it is a lifestyle decision. But it was like the opportunity that we were never gonna see again. We are outgrowing our current house, ready to kind of move into that next level. And this property came available, and it's literally in the exact spot that we want, and we'll never see it again. I had the cash available, and I sat down with Tyler, and it's like, do we don't? And Tyler's like, well, you buy the land in PG, it's not going down anytime soon.
Yeah.
Like, there's not a lot of land to build on in Pleasant Grove. And he's like, so even if you buy it cash and 6 months later decide to sell because you're like, I don't want to do this after all, I could have flipped the land like that. So I was like, there's not a ton of risk in it. And I know, I totally could have gone and got more properties, and we debated that. But at some point, like in 6-7 years, Kris, my girls will be out of the house and gone. And I want to make memories with them now. And while I could have gone and got more real estate, I think once you look at the numbers, I'm not over leveraged on this. Like, we can make it work.
Your payment of $4,000 a month, that works.
Yes.
Having the basement above that's at least 2 bedrooms,
Yes.
is probably going to bring you in
And I
$1,800.
believe in the video I said we were only going to charge $1,300 for that apartment. I confused you were spot on when you were like, that area you can rent for $1,800.
Yeah.
I misquoted because that's what I'm currently charging for our basement apartment. This one, we can totally charge that amount. And so it cuts that in half, and it gives me a little bit of that.
Yeah, so I understand what you're saying about lifestyle. I totally understand about your daughters and getting older and wanting to put some roots down. You guys like the neighborhood. What's concerning is I don't want your portfolio to stop growing either.
Yep.
Because if I'm your mentor and I'm helping you expand, we have to have a way forward.
Well, and I want to tell you, and again, like, just know that this was lifestyle driven, but it was that point in my wife and I's life where we were like, we kind of need to shoot our shot now, or we're going to miss out on a bunch of memories, but can we do it smart? So let me tell you so first off, houses in Utah are crazy expensive compared to other markets. It's just insane. But I can tell you so many different ways that we have shaved costs off of this to keep it down. We're not finishing the landscaping. Everybody I've talked to has said, put it into the loan, it's so much easier. But we're like, it's just too expensive. I could probably get another $100,000 to $200,000 of loan. Actually, probably $300,000 of loan. The bank would do that for me. And we have put a firm line and said, no, we're not doing a jumbo loan. That is our line. We won't go to a jumbo loan, even though my job, because by the way, Kris, you have a successful company. I help you run it. I'm good at running teams. I've got a pretty good job. Most people would look at my income and then look at my house and be like, you live here? I feel like I've lived conservatively for so long that it was just time to take our shot.
Well, no, I actually felt that way for years. Like, I watched you drive that. What was that car you were driving before I gave you it?
That was 7 Toyota Corolla.
Yeah, I was just like, bro is driving like a rusted out Corolla as the CEO of my company years ago. And when I gave you the car allowance as like a perk.
Oh, it was awesome.
No, that was my way of saying, stop embarrassing me. Like, your employees are looking at you, and you won't do it because, bro, you're cheap that way. And that's a compliment, by the way. Like, you and your wife don't throw money at lavish. You don't go 5-star.
And to be honest, we have gone our entire marriage sharing walls.
Yeah.
Lived in townhomes, lived in apartments. There's always been someone the next wall over.
Well, now they're going to share your garage.
And see,
your cars
again,
probably won't matter.
Even now that we're building our dream home, we're like, it's just too good. We have to have a tenant. It's just so financially smart to have that option that we can't get away from that. We're not finishing the basement. There's a bunch of other little flourishes that we decided to not move on because we're like, we can continue to add things down the road as the money accrues. And our number one thing is like, okay, we took this risk.
Yeah.
Once it's done, our next focus, get another property.
Yeah.
We have to continue saving. We're already up to $20,000 building towards that next down payment.
But you've tied up some good money in that house, and I really want to find a way to help you get it into your next investments.
For sure. Yeah, and last thing I'll just say, Kris, is, you know, in your book, Time Machine, you talk about looking at life through 5 different lenses. And while the money lens wasn't the number one in making this decision, time is a big factor. And I think that's where you and Dave Ramsey differ.
Yeah.
Is Dave Ramsey kind of talks as if everybody has all the time in the world.
And
the truth is you don't.
No.
And I really don't want to be in my 60s watching my kids all grown up and be like, wish I had made more memories with them. If it's going to cost me a little money to make those memories, I'm trying to find that balance between like living and having experiences, but doing it smart.
Well, here's where you need to be really careful.
Okay.
You know, coming from a guy who's living in a 37,000 square foot house, I can tell you that if my wife and I were to go back to a really tiny place, I can make my childhood memories with my children there just as profound and just as powerful. I think for me, what I've learned, Carson, is that the second money is used towards ownership, you always have better alternatives. But when money is used towards creating an experience, like for example, if you're like, wow, I wanted to create a beautiful memory by taking my kids to Mexico, and it's like, geez, that cost $13,000 because it's me and my wife and our three daughters, right, for the 5 of us, and we wanted to do it a certain way. $13,000 is a lot less than $1.3 million, right? You could take 2 trips a year like that and make incredible, profound memories. Your kids are also going to find memories in cutting up cardboard and you attending their competitions and sporting events, and I think the most precious moments are when they're in the struggles of life, they're struggling with a friend, a breakup, and it's being there. Like just being a bit older and having my 4 kids almost out of the house, you know, I think for me, when I look back, those are the things that I value. Those are the things that I really look at. And so the weird thing is it's like I actually bought the nice stuff. I had the house and the nice cars, but now I'm starting to look back and ask what really mattered. And the moments that mattered the most, they didn't take much money at all. And there's going to be some exceptions. Like a couple years ago, I took my kids to the Galapagos Islands. We rented this incredible yacht, 140-foot yacht for the week. You know,
how much did that cost,
chef.
Kris?
It was like $70,000 or $80,000 with tickets and everything. And I took my private jet down. It was probably like a $120,000 trip. And don't get me wrong, we created epic memories. That was an exception. That was an example of like we spent money and we did something epic. You know, but I can point to just as many examples where we created epic in the mundane, in the basic, and in the everyday. So I'm sharing this with you, not because you can reverse out of your $1.3 million decision, but I'm going to tell you like the downside of that choice that you've made that you can still mitigate. When you get to the end of your construction loan, you and your wife are going to say, oh, I thought we were going to get some of these upgrades and things, and there will be a temptation to drop another $100,000 to get the house. Well, we just want to get it finished the way we want. And then after the house is finished the way you want, well, it's like, well, now we want to get it furnished the way we want. And there's this dangerous road. Like I look in my life, and you and your wife were doing something that my wife and I did before we poured money into that $1.8 million custom built house, which is everything was about save. And once we bought that house, everything started becoming about spend. And I justified, well, my portfolio is growing and business is growing well, and I'm growing the valuation of my assets. I want to enjoy life more. And I can now separate the difference between the things that created the memories and the things that were just more things. And there's far more things that were things than were things that created memories. And so what I think you and Shalina need to look for is when is enough enough? So that you switch from spend, because by the way, this house is going to put you in spend mode. Every time you meet with the builder, it's going to be like, well, do you want this choice or that choice? Do you want these cabinets or those cabinets? And because you already have the loan with the bank, it's just going to be like, well, we want this and we want this and we want this. And what you're doing is you're training your brain like a dopamine addiction hit. We want the nice thing, we want the nice thing, we want the nice thing. When it does come to an end, there will be a temptation to say, one more nice thing, one more nice thing, one more nice thing. And if I could go back and correct something I did all the way back then, I'd have several more $1 million in the bank right now, which I think I would prefer right now because now I can measure the utility of what created value and what was just stuff. And so that's what I encourage you guys to think about is like, okay, we're building this house that's going to be spend, spend, spend. But at some point, if you can pull yourself back into save, invest mode, save, invest mode, save, invest mode, I think it'll take you further down the line. I think you'll make better financial decisions.
Thank you. That's useful.
It's strange being a purveyor of abundance and teaching people how to make the money, but I don't spend so much time speaking about how to spend the money. And I think there's some valuable lessons that I've learned about what matters and what doesn't matter. And Wayne Dyer was listening to a program of his a while ago, and this was before he passed. And I'll never forget when he said, that which is important to you in the winter of your life is different than what was important in spring. And, as we are long players looking down the road and saying, well, you're looking now at your daughters getting older over the next 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 years. And that means that you're looking at going from one season to the next. And so this idea for you guys is, well, we want our family to have a certain lifestyle. Great. But also know that 10 years from now, 15 years from now, when they're long out of the house, well, are you prepared for what will be important to you at that season of your life? It might be vastly different. And so I think just being aware of when, I don't find that people can push their needle onto spend or save. It's one or the other. It doesn't flip and flop back and forth very well at all. Because if it does, you'll drain all of your bank accounts of your money. And so it's got to be, okay, we're either in spend mode or we're in save mode. So after you finish this big decision, go back into save mode, save, invest, save, invest, save, invest, save, invest, save, invest. And then in the future, let your investments pay for whatever your next upgrades are.
We took a risk. I knew it was a risk. I looked at every way that I could, and eventually I just had to trust intuition that it was the right thing at the right time and move forward. And I know that with you continuing to mentor me and my ingenuity, like it will be a win in the long run, and we'll keep leveraging it to move forward. But that's valid. I've already felt that, like, ooh, and then we can add this, and ooh, it's
you know that
like,
feeling now.
I'm like, we've got to pull it back.
Yeah.
That analogy is like perfect for where I'm at, Kris. We've got to pull it back and be like, okay, we're in save mode again.
Well, and just also know as you finish building the house, the builder is always going to bring you a variety of options. And there's always a nicer finish. There's always a nicer option. I mean, I spent $100,000 on a master bathroom in the addition that we just did. $100,000. And mind you, it's beautiful. So I'm just going to tell you, there's always
an upgrade.
There's always an upgrade. Yep. But at some point, I would start looking at it instead of saying, wow, what's nicer? And instead you got to say, actually, what's sufficient for our needs? Like based on the way we do want to live our life, right? That house is going to give you size. It's going to give you opportunities now to create some beautiful memories, maybe bring the neighborhood kids in, whatever your family's vision is. But figure out what that line is and hold it.